CEO of Phase 2 Technology, and it is actually a big privilege for him to be here today. Today is his daughter's birthday, and he is actually flown in this morning and will be flying out, I believe, in the next couple of hours. So he has no luggage with him, straight through Spain.
Thank you. I'm glad you said I'm actually going to fly back and see her, otherwise right? So she turns 4 today. So she woke up this morning and I was getting on a plane. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was leaving and she said, "Daddy, I'm really sad." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I woke up and I didn't groan." So yeah, my name's Jeff Walpole. I'm CEO of Phase 2 Technology. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we're managing this migration effort from I guess a prime contractor perspective, working with Acquia and MediaCurrent, as Nikhil explained earlier. We've been involved in Drupal for about 5-6 years. In about 2007, we started getting pretty serious about using Drupal exclusively for our web CMS projects because our developers found that it was just a very flexible platform they could do anything with. At the time, a lot of us had worked in government before, and frankly, government wasn't doing anything interesting on the web then. It just was not even a sector that we focused on or wanted to focus on. And then in middle of 2009, we were approached by the prime contractor working for, can everyone hear me? I feel like it's okay. Prime contractor working for the White House, and they said, look, the new Obama administration is interested in Drupal. And we said, oh, cool. And they said, we're trying to find a company that, is big enough and professional enough and knows Drupal and is willing to do security clearances and is hopefully close to us and a whole bunch of other things, and the list went, and there we were, and we got to do that project in 2009, and it reinvigorated our interest in doing government because A, they were using open source, which is what we loved, and prior to that, we just didn't have a lot of examples of that happening. And B, they really genuinely wanted to do something a lot better for citizens on the web, and that's also what attracted us to this project. We saw both an understanding for open source technology and its merits, as well as a desire to actually make these websites significantly better and do something new in current thinking. And that was attractive to us in both cases. So I guess kudos to the team here at GTA for attacking it with the same vigor that we saw the White House do in 2009. Drupal really is growing in government. Steve mentioned some of the names. I did my own, I've got my own sort of keeping tabs thing. So there are about 30 states that are using government, 30 states in government that are using Drupal to some extent. The big ones are kind of New York and North Dakota and California. They have a handful of sites. So when this project is complete, moving 65 plus sites will be by far the largest migration of Drupal in state government. But you won't be alone internationally. Drupal is used enormously in European governments. And here in the US, a more comprehensive list, I'll go really fast. White House, House of Representatives, OMB, Department of Ed, Department of Energy, Commerce, FCC, SBA. As of last week, EPA just announced they're moving everything, awarded a contract. FTC is looking at a contract. FEMA, which my team is working on. DHS, NASA, USAID, US courts, US trade representatives, OPIC, National Institutes of Health, VA, HHS, SEC, National Labor Relations Board, handful of federal CIO type sites, the Federal IT Dashboard, data.gov, gousa.gov, and then there's about 20 other agencies that have dabbled or have one or more sites that I wouldn't even rank with the others because they haven't quite gone full in. So from an adoption perspective, you're in good company. From a state perspective, you're leading the curve, which is really cool and a very great place to be. So you have the benefit of what the government has done before you, the federal government, but you're also getting to invent this on the state level, so it's really cool. I talked a little bit before about why my team chose Drupal. I mean, I couldn't agree more with Steve's comments about, you hear way too much about the cost aspects of this. Open source is not free. I mean, my company is being compensated to do this work. There's services work associated with it. There's maintenance work and things like that. It's not a silver bullet that just comes magically out of the air, but there is a huge cost advantage over the long term in particular to not have licensing fees and to not have recurring maintenance costs and things like that, as well as the initial costs. So cost savings is a big part of why government does it. But another big part of it is that freedom from sort of proprietary blocking to a vendor. So, the team here at GTA can go out and learn Drupal and do a lot of their own work on the Drupal platform. They could bring in other companies that know the technology. They can go to the conferences. They can go on Drupal.org, find modules. There's a huge openness to that, that aspect of open source that makes it very attractive. It also, from my perspective, my company's perspective, we were a Java development shop. And initially, it was very hard to get our developers to want to use a packaged CMS, open source or not, particularly a PHP-based system. And what happened is we just found that we could build so much on this platform. It really became more of a framework for development than just a single software product. And that's what I think this whole idea of building platforms and being able to extend the sites that you have out there is about. So you're really getting a lot of that. And then something that's just absolutely amazing about open source is that, and you really think about sort of the economics of this and sort of the social engineering aspect of this. While we're all sitting in here today, there are programmers all over the world that are building and innovating new modules that you guys can use for free. So you don't have to have, your own army of people building exactly what you need. There's always people out there building stuff. And the example I like to use now is, there was a movement around SOPA. You guys are familiar with the Privacy Act of the federal government, and there was a sort of Twitter social media thing where it went around real quickly where it's like, let's black out all of our homepages to protest this. And I just thought to myself, wow, that's so interesting. I wonder how many of these are Drupal sites. And I thought, wow, I wonder if anyone's created a module for this. It's been like 24 hours since I've seen this on Twitter, and I go out there and there's a module, and it like blacks out your homepage for SOPA and these things, and it's just interesting how hundreds of thousands of programmers around the world have the capacity to innovate so much faster than any software company or any internal development team or anybody can do. So it's such a powerful thing to take advantage of. So I talked about how government's changing, and that's really what I want to talk about today. I mean, I think Nikhil and Steve gave you guys good introductions into the concepts of open source. I want to talk about it with what we see, particularly in the federal government. We're in DC, we do a lot of work with federal government. I want to talk about what I see changing on the web with regards to government sites and how I think it's applicable to you guys. So the things that I didn't see 5 years ago, or really even 3 or 4 years ago, was focus on usability for the end user, visualization of data and information. It was a lot of curling, a lot of stats and documents out there. Platform building, which is sort of the economics of building a single Drupal site and then being able to scale it to handle 65 plus sites and do it economically in a way that's maintainable. Collaboration, which is true interaction between users, so-called Web 2.0 or Gov 2.0 functionality, where you're actually getting citizens to engage directly with the government or with each other on your sites. Reuse, which is like what I was talking about before, the modules, you build something over here that works for this department, or maybe it's perfect for the same need that this department has over here. Take the same code, redeploy it here, you've got a cost savings. And then engagement, and that engagement is actually going out and having a one-to-one dialogue with citizens. And it's really unheard of, I think, 5 years ago, that people would be doing this kind of direct interaction with citizens through websites. So these are the kind of the trends that I'm seeing. I'm going to give you examples from each just because I think it helps to see sort of what other people have done. Last year, the FCC launched their site on Drupal. The project was head up by our now federal CIO, Steve Van Runkle, and so he is the guy who is the federal CIO who replaced Vivek Kundra. His last job before that was overseeing the building of a Drupal site, so it's kind of cool. Basically, what we really like about this site is that if you think about the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, they have a very, what I call wonky mission, which is you really have to be like an attorney or a business in this or something to understand what the FCC does. The average citizen doesn't get it. And what they've done really nicely is they've made themselves more accessible and more interesting to citizens and to those people that are stakeholders in their regulatory process. This is a screenshot of what this website looked like 1 year ago. It was voted the worst government website. And I don't think I have to explain why. I mean, it really looks like it's from the late 90s. It was just a terrible collection of links, and you know, we heard stories. We did a conference with them, and Steve spoke, and you know, they would talk about the attorneys they would talk to, or people that they would talk to that use the site regularly. And these people would just sort of memorize where things were. Like, they didn't even look. It was just, they knew like how many pages they'd have to scroll through because it was just so awful. You know, and you know, the little links to show you people and stuff. But you know, compare and contrast that with the way that we present ourselves in government now to citizens. You know, it's let's put real people out there. Let's put friendly faces. Let's put nice ways to connect with people. Like, this is about open government. This is about making ourselves accessible to the citizens. And it's just a lot more welcoming approach. Another good example would be, instead of a group of hyperlinks, they actually spend a lot of time figuring out what are the ways we're going to actually allow people to search for documents. Again, it's a lot of attorneys and people looking for something fairly specific. And that's a big part of what's going on with the Georgia.gov initiative is, let's think about how citizens are actually going to find something. Are they going to navigate hierarchically, or are they going to use a search? We have to support both, but what are the use cases that we think are most likely for people to find information? You know, so the takeaways I think from the FCC project were that user interface does matter, and I think it really matters a lot to citizens that we make these things easy to use and easy to find information. It's about making your product understood. Again, I mean, I think it's safe to say in any public sector organization, you know, there's a big difference between your understanding of what your mission is and how attuned you are to it, and the average citizen who maybe has no idea what services you even provide. So it's about that product, those services you provide, and making those known to them. And then, you know, choosing a platform where you can really customize your brand. So FCC went through a very large effort here to make sure that they reinvented themselves in the eyes of the public. New logos, new designs, new colors. It just doesn't look like that same stale government thing anymore. So, you know, the next example would be visualization. So this is the new Department of Energy site, which launched last year on Drupal. It, again, just does not look like a government site. And they specifically went out in their bid and they said, we don't want to look like government. That's just not how the DOE wants to represent itself. And they hired a design firm to kind of rebrand them. But what's interesting to me is that they actually had a lot of the same problems with regards to information. They had all this data that they figured was useful to somebody somehow, but rather than actually go through the thought process of saying, how would someone use the data that we provide for them that's public information, they said, you know what, let's just put it in PDFs and slap it up there and they'll figure out what they're going to do with it. So this is an example of how they used to look at like fuel economy data. And they'd give you a raw data file, but it wasn't very useful. This is the new site. It uses open source technology called Mapbox from some friends of ours in DC that integrates with Drupal, and it provides really beautiful layered maps that take this data and then make it presentable. So this is an example of alternative fuel stations. So they figured out, well, all these people are going to alternative fuels for their cars. We know, we have the geo-coordinates of every single station. They have to register with us. Why don't we provide that as a service to citizens and show them where these things are? So that's one example of taking that data and making it useful. And you can search, by zip codes. You can put in your zip code and say, hey, this is where I live, or this is where I'm going, where are the alternative fueling stations that I could use. And then, in addition to that, I think they spend a lot of time thinking about the data that they have. How do we make it more interesting and engaging? So, I like this example here. They're basically giving you categories of information that make you understand the mission of that agency and show you what kind of stuff they have available. And they're color coding it and they're showing it by volume and letting you drill and explore that way. As someone who's interested in environment savings and things like that, if I were on the site, I might browse through the data that they have on solar or the information they have on solar. Whereas before, there's just no way to gather that stuff. So you do that through grouping in the CMS. You do it through taxonomy and things like that we're doing on the Georgia project as well. Another great example of these visualizations would be this is how they tie in their economic data. So they've got this sort of smart grid workforce retraining program where they're sort of putting people into green jobs, and they're sort of overlaying this stuff with where geographically that occurs. It's the exact same technology, it's the same module, and it's actually the same platform and the same tool, Mapbox, but what they did is they changed out what's called the tile, which is just that layout in the back. So the design is different, the data set is different, and the way the data is displayed on the map is different, but it's the exact same tool, so there's a ton of reuse in how that works. Here's a third example. Beautiful map, this black and white image, it's beautiful. Conveys a totally different set of information, but again, it's the exact same technology. So in this case, it's just energy consumption by state. So you can imagine, you look at these things and you start to think about, as a government organization, what is the data that you have that you could make available to citizens through these tools and technologies that both A, gives them something back, but also B, shows them what you do for them. Because once they start to see the data that you collect and the data that you have, maybe they start to understand your mission better and they start to interact more efficiently with you. So those are examples from energy.gov. And the takeaways here, you have to educate those people on what you do to tell a story, and then make that data be a resource for them. Make it be a beautiful resource for them. Make them go, wow, the department of such and such is so advanced because now they're basically showing us all these things that they've learned and they know with this data that they collect. It's a totally different world than 4 or 5 years ago. So we worked on a project last year for the House of Representatives to build a platform, very much what we're doing here. And the goal there was, look, we've got 580 something members of Congress. We've got all these committees, and what happens is they just go out and have anybody build a website for them. And some of them are secure, and some of them aren't. Some of them are good, and some of them are bad. They have to maintain all these different sites and securely in one hosted environment, and it's a tremendous job. And it costs the taxpayer a lot of money, so they said, look, enough of this. They had 13 of those sites hacked, and it was all over the papers and everything, and they said, enough of this. We're standardizing, we're going Drupal. They did an RFP, they picked our firm in Acquia, we went out, we built this platform, and what we did initially was we focused a lot on sort of the long term, how are we going to have this platform sustainable and cheap to maintain and all that. But the way the contract came through, it happened in October, right? And then the elections of last year were November 6th, right? So they sort of called us on November 6th, and if you guys remember, it was a landslide, a party-changing election. I know that hadn't had anything like that since 1920s or 1930s or something. So 92 congressional seats changed hands, and of course, once the majority changes in the U.S. Congress, that means that all the committees change too. So they called this on November 7th, and they said, yeah, we're going to change the scope of this contract just a little bit. Now we got to get 120 websites done between now and Christmas-ish, or New Year's. So luckily we had our platform, and actually some of the same folks that are working on your project worked on this. They jammed right up to Thanksgiving-ish, and we delivered a platform. And these guys, basically, internal web team there, took it and they they did over 100 websites in 2 weeks by themselves. And they're actually really good websites. They all kind of have a similar layout and style and navigation, but there's a lot of functionality changes and design changes and variation between them. So really, like, what the value here is being able to get that reuse and have standardization. So instead of having hundreds or, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, 500, 600 websites you have to maintain all separate, you get this cost savings and this efficiency and this security from knowing that the platform you're using is the same all the time, even if the individual features on the homepage that a certain congressional office picks, or the colors and layout and design are different. At least they know that underlying technology is maintainable and supportable and reusable. And again, it's about speed and efficiency too. So being able to do over 100 websites in 2 weeks require them to be on the same technology. So that's sort of what we call platform building, and a lot of that is happening here. This example is another example. A not as well known way to use Drupal is as a collaboration tool, as an internal intranet, or almost people use it in a lot of cases for like social networking type needs. So this is an example. We mentioned the White House. Well, we also built an internal platform for the White House based on Drupal, which reorganized their whole intranet. And again, you had a situation in which politics played into this. You had every single administration had some early just scrapping together of documents and HTML pages and things that they would put together, and they would really never get everything organized and working cleanly until near the end of their administration. And then of course the administration would turn over and the next folks would come in and it would be someone's sort of side job and they wouldn't get to it. So they perpetuated this problem of never having a good solid intranet. I mean, you could pretty much find like the cafeteria lunch schedule, but you really couldn't find like the document you needed to fill out to get your security clearance, right? So this exercise was about using Drupal as an intranet and actually taking all those documents, those individual assets, PDFs and forms, processes and procedures, and using the taxonomy structure in Drupal to categorize things so that they showed up in the right place in both hierarchical menu structure as well as tagged in the right places. And I don't know how close this zooms, and I think we took a lot of stuff out for proprietary reasons, but maybe there's a screenshot in a minute. Oh, very important thing, there was no search mechanism, right? So again, coming back to Georgia.gov, I mean, I think 5, 10 years ago, HTML sites and websites were really about, I go to this department, and then I go down, and I go to this sub-department, and then I go to these forms, and I do that. Well, who has time for that anymore on the internet? And people expect, we're all trained by Google. We're expecting a big search box that says, be smart enough to know how to find the thing that I just blather into this box, right? And there's a lot of that thinking that goes on the internet now. And so when you have an intranet where you're busy and you got to find those forms and all those things, it's enormously frustrating to have to figure out the org structure to find the form that you need, especially if you're brand new. So again, search is a really key use of these Drupal sites and these content management systems today. I guess we're just not going to get it. Oh, there's a blow up right there. So that's the search box. And another thing is personalization. So when I log in, and this is not actually Joe Biden's account, by the way, I think that was the programmer's joke. When you log in, because the CMS, because Drupal is aware of who I am, because I've authenticated with it, now I can do all kinds of neat stuff. I can, based on my department, or based on my preferences, I can serve up my most common documents, or the things that I use most often, or the processes that apply to me. So this is that sort of, I guess what I was calling before, like a Web 2.0 type functionality. That term, I don't even know if people like that term anymore. It's dated, but grouping of processes so that you're daisy chaining these individual assets together around a process. It's something we thought about doing. We said, okay, well, why don't we just create in the content management system, how you get your security clearance page. And then that page, through linking with the CMS, pulls together the three or four different forms that you need and pulls all those into one workflow for you. So it's little things like that that you can do with a CMS. Forms, and here's an example of like favoriting things. So, you know, if I constantly use the computer support request, you know, because, you know, I'm just a bad user and I always delete stuff and whatever, then I put that up there, and that's the first thing I see when I log in. So it just makes sense. So again, it's about having a framework so this thing can evolve. And it's about using those pieces of the CMS to make intelligent content navigation decisions. So that's collaboration. So this is my favorite story. The Obama administration talked a lot about open government, but I think there's been great examples of things that we did on the White House site, but I think the number one example of true open government that really stands out is this summer they launched an online petition tool for the American public called We the People, and it's basically an invitation to any U.S. citizen to create a petition online, say petition the government for anything you want, gather popular interest in it through social media, and then have those things actually be routed to people in the West Wing who review them and then actually comment back on the ones that are most popular. So basically, it's turning the, so what could possibly go wrong with that, right? I mean, so it's actually turning that whole other side of the CMS on. So, you know, the first 2 years was all about putting out information through the content management system, making it faster and easier to upload a press release, the State of the Union video address, the policy announcements around, new tax policy or something. It's all about pushing information out. But at some point they said, okay, now we're really ready to sort of tempt fate and turn it on so that, John Q. Public can actually create an account and start to create a dialogue one-on-one with us. It's about true citizen engagement. And this isn't for every agency, it's not for everybody. There are reasons why, obviously, the White House does this first, because there's some, let's be honest, some political objectives in being able to reach out to citizens and get those things. But it's an interesting use case for the technology because what it means is that the same technology that pushes all that stuff out can also be a technology that's interactive. It causes an enormous number of challenges. For one, there's security concerns. You let people start putting stuff into that content management system, and now you have to be really careful about the ways they can game that system. And these are examples right here of all the different things that get created. The other obvious thing is, be careful what you wish for, right? I mean, the first two groups to really line up. I mean, within a day of launching this, we had thousands of petitions from the marijuana lobby, who was apparently the most organized and ready to jump on it group out there in America. They were prepared, and they had mobilized at the grassroots level to get thousands of petitions up. And you know what? Their petitions, their things got answered by the administration, and it's all out there for you to look at. It's the dialogue between literally the president's top advisors and the marijuana lobby about debating, marijuana legalization. It's pretty cool to think that that kind of thing happens using the same website, CMS, that you guys are going to be using as well. So, this is an example of sort of how the signature process works. And there's a lot of rules and routing and stuff that goes into it, but, you can see sort of, there's goals for the numbers, total signatures, so people actually log in, create an account, and sign on to that petition. And then they tweet it out and put it on Facebook and do all that kind of stuff. And it's just interesting to see all that stuff at play. And so if you're interested, it's on the White House site. It's called We the People. And I think you should probably be able to find it right from the homepage. Another use of Drupal. Last thing I want to talk about is reuse. And I think this is particularly important in state government. I'm very interested in the connections once we get the same traction in state government, and local municipalities and people like that, what are the common use cases, the common modules, and the common needs that develop between federal or international, federal, state, county, local, city sites? What are the same things? What does everybody need to be able to do? Like at the local level, a lot of it's about 311. How do you get information out through new tools like texting and things like that? Once a city develops the right solution and open sources it, do hundreds or dozens of other cities get to automatically turn that functionality on if they're using the same platform? They do. And what does that save the taxpayer? What does it save, in the procurement costs and the time that all of you guys spend actually trying to redesign that solution? Well, if somebody's done it and it works, and you can just modify it a little bit, or you can take it and improve it a little bit and then put it back there, that's a huge savings when you think about the scale of it. So this is one story. Department of Education built a they built a intranet tool using an intranet tool that we maintain called Open Atrium. And they built basically an ideation platform. So they wanted all of their employees to be able to do, kind of what should we improve around the department, same kind of thing as the petition, but it's all internal. And so people that work for Department of Education put in their ideas, other people voted for them, and then eventually, this giant suggestion box produced a bunch of initiatives that they actually went out and funded and did stuff with. Pretty cool. I mean, it's a nice sort of forward-looking, kind of management tactic. But what we found really interesting is that we took that module and we put it out there, we bundled it as a module, we put it into the open public distribution that we're using here for Georgia, and we demonstrated that we could take the exact same code that they built, move it from one type of Drupal site to another, to another, to another, and have it enable the same functionality. And we thought, wow, it'd be really cool if, so in the federal level you have FOIA requests, like FOIL, so Freedom of Information Act, and we thought, well, if the rules for Freedom of Information Act are always the same, and there are certain things you have to adhere to, wouldn't it be really cool if we had sort of the best of breed, like perfect solution for that, and then you could just move it, and anybody could just grab it and use it, and don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's sort of the direction that the Drupal community is pushing, is using our module system, and we've innovated something called apps, which is basically, it's like iPhone apps. It's an easier to install version of a module. We thought, well, if those things are just plug and play between all these different sites, how well would that work? And if you think of that, I'll think of the House of Representatives example. If all of those congressmen that are using the same site structure decide that this new social media tool that we've never heard of now and comes out 3 months from now is like the thing they have to have on their homepage to engage with their citizens, well, somebody writes a module and they all get it, and all, like that, 100 of them. So there's not a lot of this rebuilding. How would that work with you guys? 65 different agencies. Do you guys have similar forms? Do you have similar map needs? Do you have similar data exchange needs? Do you have similar, like layouts of pages, video galleries, press release sections? What are the pieces that you actually can reuse between those? So I guess that's kind of the thought I kind of want to leave you guys with is think about how the things we're talking about today with regards to the adoption of Drupal and open source are things that you can really leverage across all the different groups that you're working with here. And eventually, can hopefully contribute that back to a larger collective experience that's growing every time we build another government website on Drupal. So that's it. Should I try to take questions if there are any? Are there any questions? This is such an easy crowd. No questions. On time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So we will break for another 15 to 20 minutes and then meet back here for our next presentation.